You want it, I want it, we want it, let's do it. You want it, I want it, we want it. Good guy with bad intentions, use a bad girl with good dimensions. We should get together, commit some sins, take a nap and do it again. I'm a good guy with bad intentions, use a bad girl with good dimensions. We should get together, commit some sins, take a nap and do it again.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Ask a Powerlifter. I am Ken Bray, a powerlifter. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about squat shoes. But before we get to that, I do need to take a side note to say that this is not an endorsement of any particular product, and I will not be giving recommendations on specific products or brand names. This is more an objective answer to the questions and or products that are brought before me. So product brand names will be shown and will be introduced, but it's because those are the products, brand names that I own and I personally use. Some of you out there already know what squat shoes are or have at least seen squat shoes, but I'm gambling that the reason that you're watching this is because maybe you've seen them, or never even heard of them, and you've wondered what they are, and more importantly, do they matter? So let's take a sidestep. Every sport has a shoe, it seems like. I mean, there are running shoes, basketball shoes, I don't know if you can see that, track shoes, these are actually sprinter spikes, but yeah, track shoes, are wrestling shoes, and then of course that brings us to the topic of this video, squat shoes. Some of you may think that a shoe for lifting weights is probably, I will say that for the majority of people out there, squatting in your regular gym shoe, your running shoe, is probably okay for the majority of them. But when you hit that range where you're starting to go above your body weight for squats, you should probably start to looking at adding on additional equipment to help supplement that and help make those repetitions count, make them more efficient, and make them safer. Let's talk about the differences between a squat shoe and you're pretty much, I'm gonna say run of the mill, but you're pretty much, common running shoe or gym shoe. What you're all used to and what everyone's pretty much seen is that your gym shoe has a little bit of an elevated heel and it's got quite a bit of cushion in it, and it's flexible. You can twist it and bend it and everything else. Because the purpose of this shoe is to be a buffer between you and the earth, and when you're running, it's there to cushion that blow and protect your joints and your ligaments and your bones and everything else. It's there for your safety in that particular discipline, running. When you're squatting, there's a difference. You're not running, not typically. And so consequently, the first thing you'll notice in a squat shoe, and of course you can't really demonstrate it on a video, but it's heavier. And then if you go to try to bend it, squat shoes are rigid. Now there's a little flexibility in the toe box for Olympic lifters. The remaining part of the shoe is extremely rigid. It's solid, there's no flexibility in it. And then it's hard to tell from this shot, but there is zero cushion. So when you've seen someone with squat shoes on in a gym, you may, at first glance, they look like they're just a fancy, Nike Air Sole kind of cushiony thing, but they're literally the opposite. There is no cushion there. And then when you look at the bottom of the shoe, let's see if we can get that angle just right. If you look at the bottom of the shoe, it's very flat as compared to your running shoe when the bottom of the shoe is rounded, it's contoured. From the side. Squat shoe, flat. Running shoe, contoured. So back to the squat shoe itself. You notice on the top, it's got this little Velcro thingy, and the shoes typically are a little bit narrower. They come in different brands and flavors. Nike has a series of lifting shoes. Reebok has a series of lifting shoes. I also have this other model that instead of having a Velcro strap has this kind of ratcheting closure that you can kind of crank the shoe down onto your foot tightly. Now, what all that does, they keep the shoe solidly to your foot, and they keep your foot from compressing the shoe under the squat. When you're doing a squat and you have to walk the squat out, you're moving with a significant amount of weight, and all that weight is supported on your feet and your joints and your ligaments and your muscles. So when you're stepping out, let's say a person weighs, 200 pounds, and they're squatting double their body weight, so they're squatting 400 pounds. So they unrack the weight, and then they step back from the rack with 400 pounds on their back, one step at a time. That's 200 pounds plus 400 pounds. That's 600 pounds on each foot as they're stepping back, as they take each step out of the rack. Now, which would you prefer? A marshmallow cushion that can roll left or right when you're stepping back with 600 pounds on it, or a heavy, flat-bottomed, rock-solid sole? I will tell you, from the many times that I've made slight missteps in walking out my weights from the rack, that this flattened sole will correct that. So the best way to illustrate it is to imagine the floor, which is what it is a flat surface, and you have a typical running shoe. This has kind of rounded edges. So there's an edge there to round. So if you step back and you step not 100% flat, which is very easy to do when you have double your body weight on your back, you step not 100% flat, and there's a chance of the momentum going this way and rolling an ankle and having a bad day, as opposed to going this way. Now, with the squat shoe, the angles are very sharp between the sole and the rest of the shoe. So yes, there's always a possibility of rolling this way, but the shoe, being as heavy, as bottom heavy as it is more likely to guide your foot that way and lay flat on the floor. And it makes the sweet spot, if you will, of where you have to step down and the amount of care you have to exercise in stepping down when you're walking out or walking a squat back, it enlarges the sweet spot. So your margin of error gets larger just simply because the shoe is flat and heavy. The tightness serves the same function. Again, in a shoe like this one, it's kind of an elastic. The entire shoe is flexible and elastic, which means my foot can move around inside the shoe. So even if the shoe itself may land flat and roll flat onto the surface during a walkout or during a squat, there still is the possibility of my foot rolling inside the shoe because the shoe is flexible. But in a squat shoe, especially when you're laced up tight and Velcroed in, the shoe is very rigid. So your foot is locked to that sole. And again, there's always the possibility of an ankle roll or some other type of thing, but the chances of that lower significantly just because of the design of the shoe. This shoe is rigid and rock solid, as are all quality squat shoes. And that covers, for the most part, your safety advantages to a squat shoe. We're not going to get into a physics lesson, but we go back to our running shoe with a soft sole. When you're doing a squat, especially when you hit the bottom of the squat, where all of the weight, again in our 400-pound example, when you hit the bottom of the squat, if you hit the bottom of the squat with some amount of speed, you're decelerating 400 pounds from a descent, you're stopping and you're going in another direction. The sole of this shoe will absorb that energy. It's doing exactly what it's intended to do. It's intended to absorb impact. And at the bottom of a squat, just like in each step down when you're walking out a squat, your sole of your shoe absorbs the impact. The problem is, especially in a competitive forum, in powerlifting competition or even in training, the problem is you want as much of your power transmitted into that bar as possible. Therefore, you don't want to lose any energy in the soles of your shoes or in the cushions of your socks or in a flexible bar, which will be talked about in other episodes. But in a squat shoe, the sole has no cushion. So that means when I hit the bottom of that squat, the heel does not compress under the impact. It stays rigid. So a much, much higher percentage of my energy gets transmitted from the floor, through my musculature, through my skeletal system, through my ligaments and joints, and into that bar than with a flexible running shoe sole. Now, tactily, the feel. I have squatted in, of course, in running shoes. I've squatted in boots. I've squatted in beginners training squat shoes that have the neoprene sole. And I've squatted in, of course, professional squat shoes, which are my current lifting shoes. The professional Addy Power Weight Lift and the Adidas Lightstug 2 lifting shoes. But just like in the Reebok CrossFit Olis and the Nike Romelos, and there's some others out there, but those are the ones I could think of right off the bat, they have a solid flat sole. And so in general, when I've squatted in those as compared to other shoes, I feel stronger. I feel more stable. And seeing as though powerlifting is about pushing everything to your absolute limit, you don't need any distraction when you're going to do a squat. You don't need in your mind to be thinking, am I stepping down solidly? Am I stepping in the right place? That felt weird when I got to the bottom of the squat. You don't need any of that in your mind. You need to just know that you can step back and your feet will always fall flat on the floor, and that you can squat down and you're not going to roll over onto your ankles or roll backwards, because the shoes are designed to prevent that from happening. In a perfect world, if you're thinking about squatting, even if it's not for competition and you have the budget, I would recommend you get a pair of at least beginning or intermediate level squat shoes. Because eventually, if you plan on going heavier, it would be a good idea to be used to those and have the feel for them. But if you're just a casual gym goer and you're squatting and you're staying, right at your body weight or maybe slightly above your body weight, you're probably okay with squatting in just your typical, athletic shoes. But when you start to get into multiples, double, 1.5 times, triple your body weight, you probably should think about competing. But when you start to get into above your body weight and approach double of your body weight and higher, then you should probably seriously consider investing in a pair of squat shoes. They are not inexpensive, but they're well worth it. My squat shoes never leave the gym, or they never step outside the gym. I've had my Addy Power weight lifts for going on 7 years now, and I'm still competing in them. And I've had my Lightstug 2s for 2 years now. Same deal. No wear on the tread, but many thousands of pounds of weight have passed over the soles of these shoes, and I have yet to have one injury.